Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Keep the Line Moving, the podcast designed to talk about leadership, life, and inspiration. I am your host, Chris Gargano, and our topic this week is a leader who embodies energy, passion, and enthusiasm, and why those are strengths for each of us to have as a leader. Caiti Donovan is our guest. She will talk about that, but also she will show us why her career has been so successful by having that passion, energy, and enthusiasm. Her current title is Growth Strategy Lead at the WNBA, but her journey to get there is fascinating, from her upbringing to her education to her entrepreneurial adventures, back in corporate life, and then on to the WNBA. You have to hear this story. We will talk about the power of storytelling, the art of listening, and championing women's sports, and of course, the growth of the WNBA. The conversation begins now with Caiti Donovan on Keep the Line Moving. All right, Caiti, I am so happy to have you on the podcast. It is great to see you. Caiti, we have to start with your wonderful upbringing and where you've been and what you did. I read that and I couldn't believe what I was reading. Could you enlighten us, please? That is awesome.
Absolutely. And first, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. My wonderful upbringing. So I am proud to say that I have lived in 14 different cities across 5 different countries and 4 continents. So I really do pride myself on being both an expat and a world citizen. My dad worked in radio for the better part of my childhood, and that moved us to a couple of different places. We started in Northern California. We then moved up to Alaska. And then my mom decided to go back to get her master's degree. And so that brought us to Tennessee, where she went to the University of Tennessee. And then when I started high school, my mom actually got a job with the military, working on the civilian side. And so brought us over to Germany. And I was over there throughout almost all of my high school. So yeah, lots of moving around in my younger life. But then the majority of those 14 cities actually came in my adult life. So I made a very conscious choice as I was kind of going through my career that the cultural experiences, especially spending high school in Germany, that I had experienced, I wanted to experience through a business lens. I wanted to see how people made business decisions in other parts of the world and what drove those decisions and what drove success in those regions. And so I did that both with Viacom when I moved over to London, and then when I started my own business, and I was consulting for a lot of very early stage startups all across Australia and helping them with their go-to-market strategy. I truly believe that those cultural experiences have brought a lot into my life, into my work, and I'm now hoping to bring them into my daughter's life and what she gets to do in her upbringing.
When you were an undergrad at USC and you got your degree there, obviously, when you were at that stage of your life, did you know what you wanted to do? And how quickly did it become evident? We've changed throughout our lives, right? All of us do, and we're finding our way. But what did you want to do coming out of SC? And then how did it evolve into what you actually did?
So that's a great question. And the short answer is yes, I was one of those obnoxiously ambitious people who was like, I know exactly what I want to do, and I want to be a CEO of a company, and I'm going to get there and blow. So like the short answer is yes. The longer answer is the exact road to that success and to what that looked like. I very much did not foresee. There have been a lot of really interesting twists and turns that my career has taken, some of which I have very intentionally chosen and some of which I have not. I think what I will say is that, I graduated with a degree in PR. That is not at all what I do now. I work with data and I'm very much a big data nerd. But I think what I saw and what I still see as the through line in that is that it's all about how you are communicating information, how you are storytelling with different types of information, and how you are able to communicate a storyline or evoke emotion in another person in order to elicit them to do something, whether that's buy a product or listen to you for longer or engage with your content or engage with your product.
This is a really interesting point that you're bringing forward here. Storytelling and connecting emotionally. So there's two avenues to that. And one is the personal ability to do so, meaning Caiti Donovan's ability to do that. And then it's Caiti doing it through her corporate world or founder world or entrepreneurial world and the products that she's behind in that regard. So as I ask you that, how much of your ability to be a storyteller, because let's back up a little bit. We met and I got to see you at a Columbia University in New York City conference where you were part of a panel of women that was just fantastic. And your ability to tell stories there, along with the other women on the panel, was why we're here today. So, Caiti, let me ask you that. The parallels between your ability to tell stories and connect emotionally and the products that you've represented over the years.
I think there's a direct connection. So, and I think that I have gotten more successful over the course of my career as I have improved my ability to storytell. And that has taken a lot of time. It is, and it's taken a lot of practice. And it's taken, quite frankly, I will say a lot more, and I probably learned this later than I should have, a lot more listening rather than storytelling to perfect and hone that craft. Listening to how other people talked about things, listening to what was important to them, hearing what was going to make an impact for them or what they saw as being success in order to hone how I could tell a story in a more impactful way and in a way that was going to resonate with that person. So it became really an exercise in how well I could listen to what was happening around me and to who I was speaking with, and then how I could translate what I had heard into, here's my solution. Here's how I can help you. Here's how I think I can make an impact on what you're trying to achieve.
And Caiti, listening comes up on this podcast all the time. In fact, our first newsletter for our company, one of the sections was on listening. It comes up all the time. And then we had 3 examples from 3 different podcasts on folks like yourself talking about the value of listening. In my opinion, I'll give it a hypothesis here and tell me if you agree. To listen well, you have to care. You have to care about the person you're listening to, care about the topic, but more importantly, want to connect with the person. Do you see it that way? And is it more strategically, business sense, combination of all of it? Tell me your philosophy, if you've ever thought about it, on listening.
So yes, I cannot stress enough the caring aspect that has to come in first. And it needs to come from a place of genuinely caring, not saying that you care or faking it or trying to put on a mask of caring in order to try and maneuver something. Like, that's not caring, that's manipulation. And so it really, you have to truly look inside. And again, this was, as I alluded to earlier, some things in my career were very intentional and some were put in front of me as, this is what's happening and this is out of your control and how are you going to adapt? And in those moments, I had to decide what I really cared about, who I really cared about, and how I wanted that to direct where I was going to go. And it was a lot of me testing and learning across my own existence and experience to figure out what I really cared about, what really made me tick, what was I passionate about, who did I want to have by my side as I went through that. I don't know if you need to bleep out things, but my general work ethic now is I don't want to work with assholes. So maybe we have to bleep that. I don't want to work with jerks. So I look at that as kind of a way of fine tuning and sense checking. Like, I believe that the people that you surround yourself with lead you to your purpose.
Wow. That's what I have to say to that response right there, is simply wow. And I could go in so many different directions, but you've given us so much wisdom. And here's where I'll go with this. I really respect what you say about not wanting to work with that category of individuals. I truly respect that and understand it completely. But Caiti, you came to that conclusion through your journey. And if you were to say, and I'm not just saying this because you're a guest on this, if you were even to look at your journey on paper, it's one of courage. To start companies like that is courageous. To go, as you said, from corporate to a entrepreneurial life and then back into the WNBA. And I can't wait to get there. We have time. We will. But tell me how much courage has helped you in doing what you've done to this date in your career.
So I appreciate you saying that. I don't actually know that it's been courage so much as it's been curiosity. And maybe the two go hand in hand. I have continuously, and I pride myself on being a very curious person. And so, for example, when I was living in London and I had left Viacom and I had started working for this startup that unfortunately ran out of money about 5 months into me being with them and said, unfortunately, we don't have a job for you anymore. That was a very out of my control and very life altering moment because that had never happened to me before. I had never been in a situation where I had been told, hey, you're being let go. And I really had to reconcile what that meant. And I had the opportunity in that moment to say, do I want to just head back to New York? I had actually had a couple of people who were saying, we've got a job for you, like come back here, like come back home, like you're good, you're set. But I also looked at it and I said, I feel like I'm on this turning point right now. And I've always wanted to go and travel solo and travel the world by myself. And I have always wanted to start my own business. I have always wanted to really pursue that entrepreneurial spirit in me. And I think that I have the right motivation. And I know that I have like some initial clientele that could kind of help stand this up. And so it was that curiosity that really provoked me to go down that path. I know what's over here. I know what's back in New York. I know what that is all about, but I don't know what's out in the world. I don't know what's on the other side of starting a business. I don't know what that takes or what path that's going to lead me down or what I'm going to learn in that process. And so the curiosity behind that really motivated me to try and to see what that could look like and where that could lead me. And in that particular case, it led me on a year-long journey living in Thailand and all over Australia in one of the best years of my life, equally one of the hardest years of my life, but really exploring and transforming who I was as a person all the way down to my very core. And as a result of that, as a business person as well, what I was capable of achieving in a business sense and how I was capable of leading both myself and others.
And folks don't often think, I don't know that they correlate when you're a founder of a business. It's so much effort. You talk about the grind and getting it launched and funding. They think about that type of it. But also in entrepreneurial work, you're also leading, but you're leading yourself, you're leading the business. It's just a different type of leadership. So did that leadership prepare you for your job now? And if so, how?
I will say I wholly hold that time in my life as responsible for where I am now in my career. Had I decided to go the safer route, I do not think, A, that I would have excelled the way that I have in my career and be where I am. And B, I don't think that I would have the perspective that allows me to bring my best self to my work and in what I'm doing today. So when I finally eventually came back to the United States, I got recruited by Spotify to come on and lead a global arm of their business. And a big part of the area that they were looking to expand into was the Asia Pacific region. So Australia and parts of Southeast Asia. And like they were looking at what expansion could look like in that region. I had literally just come from being in that region. So it gave me the opportunity to almost instantly apply all of that very recent learning to how I was now going to help expand this already global business and apply myself across 61 different countries at the time.
And then you go back to the entrepreneurial world, right? And you founded the company She Is. Could you explain the core of that and the mission? Because obviously I've read interviews, I've seen interviews that you've conducted when you were there. You were very passionate about that endeavor. Is that fair to say?
That is very fair to say. Throughout my entire life, when I was looking back on what had motivated me at different points in my entire life, sports had always been a really big motivator for me. I played 5 different sports as a kid. And so I looked at that and I said, all right, I don't just want to try and dive into the sports industry. I want to do something that I still feel is going to have an impact on the world. And so the combination of that was looking at it and saying, I was a young athlete. Like, what was I looking up to? And I remember distinctly when I was, and this is going to date myself, when I was 11 years old, and the WNBA launched, and having a conversation with one of my parents' friends and saying, oh, it's so exciting. Like, there's a women's professional basketball league, and isn't that cool? And like, as a young girl, being really excited about the potential that I saw with this being announced. And his response to me was, they're never going to amount to anything. Women's basketball is never, at a professional level, is never going to last. It's never going to amount to anything. And for me, like, that was soul crushing. That was me looking at it and going, oh, well, that's disappointing. And like, of course I'm going to trust you. You're my parents' friend. You're older. You're clearly wiser. Like, of course I have to trust that analysis. So for almost 20 years, I didn't watch women's basketball. I didn't watch professional WNBA basketball. And then when we started She Is, we launched at the WNBA headquarters. Lisa Borders was the president at that time. She was one of the first women to come on board with what we were talking about doing and saying, we want this to be something that, in a similar way to how the men's sports world interacts with each other, something where it's a connective tissue, where we put all of the leaders of these different women's sports leagues or organizations that are touching women's sports. So the USTA, for example, has women athletes obviously participating in it. We want them all at the table together. We want these leaders together. We want for there to be a shared mindset in how we grow this space together. So we launched at the WNBA headquarters. And in the lead up to that, I went, I need to watch WNBA. I need to be a fan here. Like, I need to get back into this. And I cannot tell you how instantly I connected with the product that they were producing. I was instantly enamored by the talent on the court. It was incredible to me how, unlike NBA basketball, which tends to focus just on the superstars, it is typically a one, maybe a 2-man show on most courts, right? With just, and if that one player is out, there's a chance that your team isn't winning, right? That's not the case with the WNBA. The WNBA goes back to the fundamentals of the game of basketball, the strategy of how you operate as a full team and how that whole team has to truly operate together in order to win a game. And I found that strategy absolutely fascinating to watch. And paired with the other sports, it became very clear to me very early on in our journey with She Is that with the people that we were working with, the passion that was there, the true desire amongst this side of the industry to collaborate. Like, people were really coming together and saying, yes, how do we work together? How do we make this better together? All of that combined, I realized I had found my passion meets purpose kind of sweet spot.
Then you went from She Is into the WNBA, where you are the growth strategy lead. What does that mean, Caiti? That's a really cool sounding title.
Well, and I will say there was a stopover at Sports Innovation Lab in between that. I want to give credit to a friend of mine, Angela Ruggiero, who is an amazing and incredible 4-time Olympic athlete and an absolute inspiration in the women's sports space. And I am incredibly proud of the work that I got to do at her company and the Fan Project. But yes, that then transitioned into the WNBA. Growth strategy, as I see it, is a wonderful, happy mix of understanding not only where do we see the strategic focus of our business in the next 1 to 3 years, how do we put different pieces in place to ensure our success in the next 1 to 3 years, but how do we ultimately see that as the stepping stones that are going to give us the next 10, 20, 50 years of a roadmap ahead of us and make us successful in the decades to come? The decisions that we're making now, and I'll make this really, really kind of pointed, in the next 2 years, we are going to negotiate what I guarantee will be our biggest media rights deal ever. We are going to most likely renegotiate our CBA, and we are going to expand. We already have one expansion team, and Caiti has not been shy about saying we expect for there to be more expansion teams coming. So those are 3 really monumental things that are happening in a very short amount of time. And the decisions that we make around that need to not only harness a knowledge of how that impacts our short-term roadmap, but how those decisions will ultimately set up what the next decade plus of our roadmap really looks like.
So expansion, enhanced media rights, visibility. The first expansion team I saw in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is great. And then you just had a finals with the New York Liberty and the Las Vegas Aces. The Aces win it for the second year in a row.
Yep.
Talk about buzz. Tell me how proud you were of those finals that you witnessed some time ago.
The pride is still sitting very strong inside of my heart and my head. It was the most successful season that we have had on record at the WNBA in our entire history. It is the first time that every single area of our business has been up double or even triple digits in growth year on year. It quite literally set us up for now being able to have explosive and hyper growth for the years to come. Aces versus Liberty were at the heart of that. That was the storyline, starting with free agency. Like, they both just blew it out of the water and set up this incredible roster of talent on both of their teams. You've got this storyline starting to boil, and then they end up playing each other 9 times, I think, over the course of the entire season. So including finals, like, it was the most that any 2 teams have ever played each other. And so it created this engagement in this story arc that even the most casual a fan wanted to come to. I walked into game 3 and I literally got teary-eyed because it was 17,000 fans filled to the rafters, and they did not stop cheering the entire game. They were up out of their seats. That building was electric. And it's what women's sports deserves. It's what that team deserved, coming from playing in Westchester and in a high school arena to playing in front of that crowd with that community and that type of energy. It was monumental.
So in your day-to-day, how much are you driving camaraderie and your team, right? And getting people to be forward thinking, just like you articulated, like where the sport is going, what it's like to walk into a crowded and loud arena. But then the practical sense of your day to day, how do you couple all that and just get it to where, hey, this is our passion. Let's make this sport the greatest it can be. How do you do it on a day-to-day basis, Caiti?
So I am a big fan of the North Star. And there are many people who, especially in the startup and tech space, I believe it was originally written about in the kind of discussion around like growth mindset and how that is facilitated. The North Star is essentially a guiding metric and framework for how you're going to point your business, how you are going to align everybody, regardless of which team they work on, to a guiding light, to a guiding, and it has to be far off. It has to be in the distance. It has to be something that allows for everybody to be both aspirational and executional. My strength suit that I will also add into this as kind of a layer, I am a perpetual silver linings finder. So I am really the person who sometimes to a fault is there coming in and looking at even the most difficult or stressful or sometimes dire situations and saying, hey, how do we pull learning out of this? How do we pull opportunity out of this? Okay, that partner decided that they didn't want to come in at the number that we were hoping that they would. How do we still make the most out of that opportunity? How do we still point this towards our North Star?
Caiti, I personally think there's so much value in seeing the silver lining and learnings from things, even when they're dire. So I really, truly appreciate you bringing that forward. And there's a lot of things we can clip from this interview and send to graduate programs all around the country. So I absolutely appreciate it. All right. Are you ready for the all-star moments?
Yes, go for it.
Let's do it, Caiti. Rapid fire. Here we go. First thought, best thought. Okay.
Yes.
1, how do you deal with adversity?
With patience and with empathy, asking the question, what is the best possible view of this scenario, of how somebody might be thinking? What is the most gracious view of how somebody might be thinking? Trying to view it through their eyes or through an empathetic lens is always my first go-to.
2, how do you give yourself fuel?
Oh, my daughter. She is, and I think this is such a benefit of working in an environment that is a hybrid environment. When I'm working at home, when I take my lunch break, I go out and have lunch with her. And she literally, technically for the second time, but we finally caught it on video, literally right before I got on the phone with you, Chris, she walked and she walked to me and she comes and she's got this huge smile on her face and she gives me a big hug. And it's just, that is so energizing and it's so wonderful. And quite frankly, it is a big part of why I'm doing what I do. I want the world that I'm creating and the impact that I have to make it a better space for her to exist.
Oh, I love that. All right. 3, what does never give up mean to you?
Ultimately, never give up means never stop at least trying. So even if it's not always going to have the end result, it is never stop trying. And it will probably add on to that, never stop learning.
4, what is the value of collaboration?
Everything. Everything. I cannot stress that enough. I believe that collaboration is the best way to get ahead.
I'm with you on that. I am with you on that. 5, hiring people, Caiti. What do you look for in an ideal candidate? And if there are little sirens to put on this podcast for people to pay attention and that are trying to start their careers or somewhere in their early careers, it's time now because that siren's going off.
All right. 3 things. 1, I want to see how you're curious. I want to see how you go after things that you don't know and how you try to either learn or evolve or in some way show curiosity. 2, how do you deal with struggle? How do you deal with crisis? What are examples where you have had to deal with those things and what came out of those types of things? And 3, I really, really cannot stress how important it is to have diverse backgrounds. I want people who have lived in different countries. I want people who speak different languages. I want people who experience the world in different ways. I want people who approach women's sports in different ways than I do. I want to have people around me who are going to be the ones to put their hand up and say, hey, actually, in my experience, this might work better, or this might be the better route to go. So people who will challenge my thinking and force me to look at something through a different light.
As you can see, I'm taking copious notes. Fantastic. 6, describe yourself as a leader in 1 sentence.
I would say I am a leader who values collaboration, who values data-driven decision making, and who is motivated by the impact that we can have on both our circle and our space and the broader world around us.
Nicely done. Last one, 7. What's the difference between a manager and a leader?
Oh, this one I very much know. So I would say a manager is somebody who dictates and who creates tactical direction. A leader is somebody who inspires. A leader is somebody who sets a path and allows for there to be learning and growth and understanding and opportunity.
Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I have. Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
And we thank Caiti very much for being on the show. My number one takeaway is, you guessed it, what she said when she is hiring somebody, the qualities that she looks for. Number 1, curiosity. Going after things you don't know, trying to understand and learn what you don't know. This comes up on this podcast all the time, and Caiti said it today. Number 2, dealing with adversity. What are you willing to suffer through to get to the other side? If it's a crisis or pain, how do you get to the other side? And number 3, having a diverse background, diverse experiences, being able to champion women's sports, being able to see and have a perspective on other things rather than just what you think you need to know. I really thought what Caiti shared with us today in totality was incredibly valuable. We thank Caiti very much for being on the show. I am Chris Gargano. We will see you next week, everybody, on Keep the Line Moving. Every week, you hear guests on this podcast talk about some of their biggest leadership challenges. As a leader, you want to make an impact on those you lead and reach your organization's goals, while also optimizing your time management. Wherever you are in your leadership journey, we could all use some help. This is what we focus on with our group and individual coaching services. To book a call or get more information, email me directly at chrisg@garganoleadership.com or visit our website at garganoleadership.com. For our podcast and video producer, Jack Radutsky, and our marketing coordinator, Savin Narwal, have a great week, everybody.